So if today's crime stats are anything to go by, South Africa has got a long way to go to rid itself of gender-based violence. The latest stats show an uptick in the number of sexual offences reported, with institutions of higher learning worryingly, in fact, institutions of learning overall, worryingly becoming the new hotspots for such offences. Let's talk more about this with Gender Equality Commissioner Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng. She's also United Nations Special Rapporteur for Health, joining us by Skype from Johannesburg this afternoon. Doctor, always good to speak to you. Let me start with your general reading of the presentation by the Police Minister today.
Yes, thank you very much, Tembegile. It continues to paint a really grim picture for the entire country. And when you see the trend year on year, we really are in a time of serious crisis. And really echoing all the different, sectors of communities and women who've been saying that, look, the issue of gender-based violence in this country is a serious one. And, we see the trend year on year, the numbers keep going up, and there's really no indication of any, targeted responses from the police specifically on how to handle this issue.
And you're looking at a 1.7% increase in the number of sexual offences in the country. Most of those would, based on our past, be women. And I was speaking to Lisa Vetten earlier, who was saying we also need a detailed breakdown, in fact, of the people affected by the scourge. Are they women? What are their ages? Where are the attacks happening and how? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We need the data to be more disintegrated than it is at the moment. We need to get to the granular details of the type of crimes that are happening. And what's also important is to remember that people have different types of vulnerabilities, right? So we need to know how many people who are differently abled or who are using mobility aids are part of these statistics. How many people who are lesbians who are attacked in terms of homophobic rape are part of those statistics. We need to know in terms of the ages, in terms of children, because we know that children, boys and girls, do have a specific risk factor because they are minors, right, that they have. The extremes of age, the elderly, we know as well in South Africa, some of the horrific headlines that we see often involving elderly women. We do need to know in much more detail. And the data needs to come actually much faster so that we can be responsive to an immediate sort of data point, as opposed to waiting months to understand what the trend was a year ago. But time has elapsed, so we need the statistics to be going hand in hand and to come sooner and much quicker, and really incorporate technology in how we keep, the trends in terms of monitoring, because there are a lot of community-based organizations who would really like to assist, but because the statistics are not really readily available, it makes it incredibly difficult to plan and react in time.
The numbers are going to be released quarterly now after confirmation from the police minister today. That has been a call from civil society for the past 10 years, really. It's now finally going to happen. Do you think quarterly reports are a fast enough turnaround on those numbers in order to get the analysis that you're referring to?
It will be a bit of an improvement based on what we already have currently. So any improvement in terms of regular updates will be welcome. But I do know that in terms of technology and innovation, in terms of policing innovation, we should be expecting a little bit more than just a quarterly report. It's important, I can tell you why. If you imagine you are living, under a constant threat of violence, there's still so much in terms of gender-based violence and how we define it and understand in South Africa that's missing out other types of violence that are also problematic. Mental impact of living under a constant threat of violence is itself a form of violence. A lot of the time we really focus only on sexual violence and where there is physical proof of injuries, but there's so many people who are in established relationships, who are in marriages, who are literally every day being coerced into sexual contact and sexual acts. And often those types of crimes don't make it into the headlines, and the reporting of those crimes are already small. So I think for me, more than just giving us quarterly updates, it's about changing the policing system, the stigma, the attitude at the police stations, especially in the front offices, where people need to be able to feel encouraged and confident that when they report a case, the police will not turn into a social worker and start telling them to go and fix their marriage, as opposed to actually taking a statement and allowing the justice to take its course. I think it's very important to still remember that whether it's quarterly or once a year, these cases are still severely underreported, and there's a lot more that we need to do as a community, as a country, in terms of these statistics that we find today.
And the police minister, and this was a startling number, saying that 380 of the sexual offences reported in the country, the rapes, took place at education facilities, universities, colleges, schools. When you look at that number, I'm thinking back 4 or 5 years ago when we had the Fees Must Fall movement, which then gave birth to things like the RU reference list, where university students were naming young men on campus, professors, lecturers, who had in some way or form abused them sexually. And you wonder if enough attention has been paid to that space on the back of those protests by young women.
And, from, of course, being an, positionality, I'm outside of an institution of higher learning. But what I can tell you is that people don't understand the power dynamics, right, between a lecturer and a student, despite both being adults. There's a lot to be said about the sex for marks scandals, right, where young people are being raped and harassed and coerced into performing sexual acts in order for them to either have their scripts marked or not, have their results withheld. Those things are ongoing. And at the Commission for Gender Equality, we did had progressive hearings that involved some of the institutions of higher learning. And although the hearings are about procurement, we did bring this issue of sexual violence on campuses. And one of the things that stand out to this day is that a lot of the campuses don't have proper policies, right, to guide them on how to respond and to prevent gender-based violence on campus. And they also fail in terms of, services. So social work services, psychology services, and post-trauma medical and forensic services. A lot of campus violence still depends squarely on having the government services available, and often campus is not really located geographically close to where the police or the nearest district hospital are. So there is a lot to be said about prevention efforts on campus, about policies on campus, but also then people who have been found to be predators or sexually being perpetrators of violence on campus can then just hop from one campus to another to get a different position and just continue with that. So we have to be really strict in terms of what it means and having real consequences for people who are predators. Otherwise, if I can just move from one campus to another, there's really no consequence for my career and for that behavior, because we know the criminal justice is very, very slow. So by the time 10 years has elapsed for one case, how many victims will that person be counting?
Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, Commissioner at the Commission for Gender Equality, also newly appointed United Nations Special Rapporteur for Health. Good to speak to you.